They were born minutes apart and died months apart, each in a room no one knew existed, in opposite wings of a house that defied memory and logic. Neither sister had ever crossed those thresholds. And yet, that's where they were found, cold, still, and silent, in spaces no one had dared enter in decades. What happened inside the Vellinger house remains one of the most whispered, most feared stories in upstate New York. Some say the house itself chose their fates. Others speak of mirrors, locked doors, and family secrets buried beneath floorboards and piano keys. But only one thing is certain: both twins died in rooms they'd never entered. Don't forget to subscribe for more chilling, true-inspired stories like this. New mysteries every week. The house stood beyond the tree line, veiled by mist that rarely lifted, even in summer. Locals in the town of Pembroke referred to it only as that place or the Vellinger estate, and even that was said in hushed tones. It had once been a grand structure, built of dark oak and slate, designed in the Victorian Gothic style that promised wealth, intelligence, and secrecy. Now, in 1957, its silhouette loomed like a warning. Surrounding the estate were groves of black pine, so tightly packed they drowned out the sky. No birds sang near the house, no mail was delivered. The gravel path leading to its front steps had been consumed by moss. Only the occasional deliveryman for dry goods or the rare physician dared approach, and even they left quickly, eyes down. Inside, the air was thick with time. Dust floated like a second skin over the furniture, and heavy drapes muted all daylight. But the house was not abandoned. It breathed in its way. The walls creaked not from age but tension. Paintings watched from crooked angles. Doors sometimes opened, then refused to shut. Other doors remained sealed forever, hinges rusted into place. Silence was rarely complete. It was layered with faint movements. Piano notes too faint to trace, the shiver of footsteps upstairs when no one was there. It was within these walls that Vivian and Vera Vellinger had grown up. Their childhood had been as unusual as the house itself. Neither girl had friends outside the estate. They were tutored at home, rarely seen by anyone from the town. Their mother, Clara, had inherited the mansion from her grandfather and had refused to leave it after marrying Dr. Elmore Vellinger, a man known for his experiments in psychology and strange post-war consulting work. He never spoke of his past, nor of his time overseas. Some believed he dabbled in things better left unnamed. Vivian, the elder by 4 minutes, was quiet, inward, drawn to music. She played the grand piano in the main parlor with haunting precision from the age of 4. Vera was her contrast, bright, sharp-tongued, and obsessed with old books, especially those about architecture, mythology, and the occult. Yet despite their differences, they were bound by something deeper than sisterhood, something invisible, maybe even supernatural. People who had visited the house in its better days said the twins often mirrored each other unconsciously. One would tilt her head, and the other would do the same. They would finish each other's thoughts. Occasionally they were found sleepwalking, each to a room neither had ever entered before, and then, just before their 12th birthday, the estate closed its gates for good. No more deliveries, no more sightings. The fog thickened around the property, and the town turned its back on the Vellingers. Rumors swirled: madness, death, hidden children, but no one knew the truth. In 1957, 20 years after that final gate closing, one of the twins was found dead, Vivian, the quiet one, inside a sealed bedroom on the east wing of the house. According to all blueprints and family records, that room should not have existed. It was walled off, no door, no window. Yet there she lay, a page of music clutched in her hand. And that was only the beginning. From their earliest moments, Vivian and Vera Vellinger existed as reflections of one another, two halves of something whole, though never identical. They shared the same green-grey eyes, the same pale complexion, the same long dark curls that seemed to shimmer blue under certain light. But beyond appearances, they diverged in ways that were as uncanny as they were undeniable. Vivian was silence made flesh. Her voice, when heard, was soft and slow. Every syllable weighed before it left her lips. She found comfort in solitude, drawn to quiet spaces and delicate details. A single candle could keep her attention for hours. Music was her true language. Before she could read, she could play. Her hands moved across the piano like they belonged to someone older, someone haunted. She never read sheet music. She simply listened once, then repeated what she'd heard with uncanny precision. Her melodies often drifted through the halls at night, stirring emotions no one could name. Vera, on the other hand, was noise and fire. Where Vivian hesitated, Vera charged forward. She spoke in fast bursts, constantly seeking, constantly challenging. Books became her obsession, thick tomes filled with strange symbols, forgotten architecture, dark folk tales. She devoured them, then demanded more. Her favorites were stories of hidden doorways, lost civilizations, and the idea that truth was always concealed behind veils. While Vivian played music, Vera tore through every locked cabinet in the house, every drawer, every attic trunk. Still, for all their differences, they were impossibly in sync. Their footsteps often fell in perfect rhythm. They could communicate without words, a glance sufficient to convey full thoughts. Nanny Hetty, the woman who raised them more than their own mother, used to say the girls had been stitched together at the soul. Their parents noticed too, though in very different ways. Dr. Elmore observed them like a scientist might observe an experiment. He made notes, asked pointed questions, and occasionally recorded their behaviors on old tape reels. His study door remained locked, and what he did with his notes was never shared. Clara, their mother, saw their bond as a blessing and a curse. She was deeply religious and spoke often of mirrored spirits and divine balance. She kept a Bible in every room and made the twins pray every morning, separately, so that God could hear them as individuals. By the time they were 8, the house had already begun to respond to them in subtle, disturbing ways. Mirrors fogged when they passed, even when the air was dry. Lights flickered more often near Vivian. Old books fell from shelves whenever Vera grew frustrated. Once, during a summer storm, a window burst open as the girls argued. No wind, no structural flaw, just shattered glass in perfect symmetry. They began to dream strange dreams, always of places they'd never seen. Vivian described a room with red wallpaper and no doors, where a piano played itself endlessly. Vera spoke of a narrow spiral staircase behind a fireplace, leading to a library filled with books written in a language she somehow understood. When they awoke, they could recount each other's dreams in perfect detail. It was as if their subconscious minds intertwined during sleep, trading fears and visions like passing notes. Still, none of this disturbed them. Not yet. To the twins, their world was normal. The strange belonged to them, just as the house did. They accepted their unusual connection the way one accepts their shadow, but others weren't so sure. Visitors, few and far between, often left with unease. "They stare too much," someone once whispered. "Like they see something we don't." Even the groundskeeper refused to enter the house when the girls were home alone. "They hum at the same time," he muttered, "even when they're in different rooms." For all their unity, the first true break between them came one rainy afternoon, when Nanny Hetty warned them, in a trembling voice, never to open the door at the end of the east corridor. "Because that room," she whispered, "doesn't belong to either of you." Nanny Hetty had been with the Vellingers long before the twins were born. She came from a family of caretakers who had served the estate since the Civil War, and though her knees ached and her hair had turned to silver, she remained the only warmth in a house otherwise heavy with cold intellect and distant parenting. The girls adored her. To them she was stories by the fire, peppermint candy in pockets, and lullabies sung in hushed tones as thunder rolled across the hills. But Hetty had secrets too. She would pause when walking certain hallways. She avoided the mirrors after dusk and muttered small prayers when lighting candles in rooms the girls never entered. And she feared the east corridor. Always the east corridor. It was on the eve of the twins' 9th birthday that something shifted in her. She grew anxious, glancing over her shoulder as she moved through the halls. Her eyes, once gentle, darted quickly from shadow to shadow. She began locking the twins' bedroom door from the outside at night. When Clara scolded her for it, Hetty only whispered, "They're starting to hear it now." "We have to keep them safe." Clara dismissed her concerns. Dr. Elmore ignored them entirely. One rainy morning, the girls found Hetty in the main parlor, staring at the grand piano with a look of dread. Vivian approached, quietly sitting beside her on the bench. Hetty's hand reached out and gently touched Vivian's. "You must never follow the music if it comes from beyond the corridor," she said. "No matter how sweet it sounds." Vera had entered behind them, catching only the last words. "What's beyond the corridor?" she asked. "Is there a room?" Hetty didn't answer. Later that week, she brought them into the old linen room, a space crammed with mothballs, folded sheets and faded quilts, and made them swear on their mother's Bible never to open the final door on the east side. She showed them a key, ancient and blackened, then slipped it into a hidden compartment behind the fireplace bricks. "That door leads nowhere safe," she said, "and once you open it, it never truly closes again." It was the first time the girls had ever seen her truly afraid, the kind of fear that makes adults look like children again. The next morning, Hetty was gone. No note, no suitcase missing. Her bed was still made, her apron folded neatly at the foot. Her rosary beads were left on the windowsill, one bead snapped, the string slightly frayed. Clara claimed Hetty had grown senile and wandered off. Dr. Elmore offered no theory at all. A search party was never organized. The police filed a single report, then dropped the matter entirely. It was as though she had never existed outside the memory of the girls. But Vivian knew better. That night she woke gasping, the sound of footsteps echoing outside their room. She crept to the door and placed her ear against the wood. Soft humming came from the hallway, Hetty's lullaby. Vera awoke seconds later. "You hear it too?" They both stood in silence, hearts racing. The humming faded. Then a single distinct sound, a key turning in a lock. The next morning, Vivian found faint, muddy footprints just past their door. They led toward the east wing, but vanished near the final hallway window. There was no sign of forced entry, no smudges on the glass, just those prints, small, precise, unmistakably Hetty's. After that, the house felt different. Clara took to prayer even more obsessively. Dr. Elmore began spending whole nights in his study, emerging with bloodshot eyes and a trembling hand. The girls grew quieter, more cautious. The piano gathered dust, and the bookshelves remained untouched. But the east corridor never lost its pull. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, they could swear they heard the soft creak of that forbidden door. Not opening, just shifting, breathing, waiting. And though neither would admit it aloud, both twins began to dream of a woman calling to them from behind that door. She sounded exactly like Hetty. Years passed slowly in the Vellinger house. Seasons blurred behind the thick drapery, and the twins, now 11, wandered its endless halls like two forgotten spirits trapped in time. Their world was made of dimly lit corridors, the ticking of antique clocks, and the quiet hush of a family unraveling in silence. With no tutors anymore, no visitors, and only the occasional knock from a delivery at the gate, the girls turned inward, and deeper into the house itself. They had explored much of it already: hidden crawl spaces, servants' stairs, old rooms with wallpaper peeling like shed skin. Yet one section remained stubbornly sealed, the east corridor. The house had many hallways, but this one was different. It stretched farther than logic allowed, ending at a wall that had no window, only the heavy outline of a door with no handle. Its frame was slightly warped, as if resisting time itself. The wallpaper along the corridor was darker, more faded than anywhere else, patterned with roses that seemed to droop like withering heads. And though the house had long lost any sense of warmth, this hallway breathed cold. Vera became obsessed. Each day, she measured the corridor's length in footsteps. Sometimes it counted as 22, other times 25. Once, it stretched to 31. Vivian refused to walk the whole length anymore. She stopped halfway, always feeling something press against her chest the deeper she went. One afternoon, as winter clawed at the windows and the fireplace roared in vain, Vera dragged out an old blueprint of the mansion from their father's study. It was hand-drawn and fragile, the paper yellowed and brittle. She studied every floor, every wing, until her finger landed on something odd. "There should be another room," she whispered. Vivian looked over her shoulder. There, faint but unmistakable, was a marked square just past the sealed door. A 13th room. No label, no measurements, just an anonymous space, inked lightly, as though the architect had doubted it himself. "That's not possible," Vivian said. "Neither is a hallway that changes its length." Vera spent the next week searching for other references. She found none. Every other floor plan excluded the room. The copies in the library ended at 12. Only the original bore the mark. Then came the key. Vivian found it by accident. She was cleaning out Hetty's old sewing cabinet when it fell from a hidden panel at the bottom, blackened, just as Hetty had described, cold to the touch even near the fire. They stared at it in silence. "It doesn't mean we have to open it," Vivian said. Vera didn't respond. She didn't need to. That night, Vera dreamt of the corridor again. Only this time, the door was open, just slightly. She stood at the threshold. On the other side was fog, thick and pulsing like breath. Then a voice. "You've already been here." She woke with a start, drenched in sweat, the covers twisted around her legs. She didn't tell Vivian. The next day, the corridor measured 24 steps, and the door had changed. Its surface, once smooth and still, now bore faint scratches. Not carved, not intentional. More like the quiet dragging of fingernails. Vivian touched the wood and pulled back immediately. It was warm. Not like a sun-bathed wall, but like skin. She looked to Vera, who was staring, transfixed. "We don't have to go further," Vivian said. "Not everything hidden needs to be found." But Vera's eyes didn't leave the door. Some things are hidden because they were forgotten. And that was when they both heard it, just beyond the sealed wood, a sound neither had heard since childhood. Hetty's voice, whispering their names. Something had changed. The moment the twins heard Hetty's voice, low, cracked, familiar, the house seemed to breathe deeper. The air thickened. Shadows no longer stayed still. And the east corridor, once only unsettling, began to feel alive. Vivian stopped playing the piano. Her hands, once steady and sure, trembled now. When she tried to press the keys, dissonant tones rang out, notes she hadn't meant to strike. Her sleep was no longer quiet. She woke each night to faint music, not from the parlor, but from somewhere inside the walls. Always the same phrase, repeated in a minor key, echoing through unseen spaces. Vera became bolder. She traced the house's structure in her notebook, now filled with sketches of doors that weren't there, windows that blinked open then vanished, and halls that twisted in her memory. She started whispering back to the voices. Vivian heard her once, in the middle of the night, standing in front of the corridor door, murmuring something in a language she didn't understand. "So you're scaring me," Vivian said one morning, her voice barely audible. "I think we're being watched," Vera replied, not turning from the window, but not by something outside. It started with the mirrors. The one in their shared bedroom warped. Vivian saw herself blinking out of sync, her reflection smiling when she wasn't. She covered it with a blanket. The next day, it was uncovered again. Then came the walls. Late at night, they began to hear shuffling sounds behind the plaster. Not mice, not pipes, slow, deliberate footsteps, pauses, breathing, as if something or someone was standing just inches away, separated only by the thinnest barrier of wood and time. Vivian placed her ear against the wallpaper in the upstairs hallway. At first, there was silence. Then the distinct sound of a breath drawn in. She yanked back, heart racing. The wallpaper tore slightly under her touch, revealing something beneath, an eye, drawn in graphite, perfectly shaded, human. Vera found more, behind picture frames, under floorboards, etched into the backs of closet doors, eyes, dozens of them, always watching. "What does it mean?" Vivian asked, her voice shaking. "I think they're trying to remember us," Vera said, "or maybe we're remembering them." The line between memory and haunting blurred quickly after that. Clara no longer left her bedroom. The girls brought her food on trays, untouched the next morning. Dr. Elmore had moved entirely into his study, now locked at all hours. Once they heard shouting inside, words like projection, resonance, and subject instability. But when they knocked, silence returned. The only room that felt untouched was the nursery. Though they hadn't set foot there in years, one night Vivian passed by and found the rocking chair moving slow and steady. A lullaby hummed from no source. She stood frozen until Vera came behind her, whispering, "She used to sit there." The atmosphere grew thick with memory. Toys began appearing in odd places, stacked blocks spelling their names. Dolls they hadn't touched since toddlerhood seated around tables. One doll blinked when Vivian walked past. She threw it in the fire. The next morning, it was back in their room, untouched by flame. The voices grew clearer. Sometimes they said, "Come see." Other times, "Remember who you are," but most often, "Finish the song." One afternoon, while walking the southern hallway, Vivian paused and turned sharply. "I felt it," she whispered. "A breath on my neck." Vera nodded. "It's not just the corridor anymore. The house knows we're listening." That night they found new writing on the blueprint they'd kept hidden beneath their bed. It hadn't been there before, scrawled in the same graphite as the eyes behind the walls. "You belong to the 13th. The Vellinger house had always been a place of silence and secrets, but no room held more mystery than Dr. Elmore's study. The door remained locked day and night. No one entered but him. No one dared knock. For years it had simply been Father's room, a place the twins passed without pause, the kind of quiet threat that loomed unspoken. But as the house shifted, so did the rules. It was Vera who found the key. Hidden beneath the false bottom of their father's desk drawer, wrapped in a torn handkerchief, stained with something brown and long dried. She said nothing at first, just kept it hidden inside the lining of her coat until the pull became too strong. One night, as thunder cracked the sky and the house seemed to groan under its own weight, she turned the key. The room was not what they expected. It wasn't a study, it was a laboratory. Not the kind with beakers and bubbling vials, but something older, more personal, a series of tables arranged with precision, notebooks stacked in columns, diagrams on the walls, a chalkboard filled with symbols neither of them recognized. In the center stood a large mirror, taller than any door in the house, covered by a heavy velvet drape. Vivian hesitated. "We shouldn't be here," but Vera was already flipping through the journals. The entries began in 1940, written in meticulous script. Subject 6, resonant feedback successful. Shared dream state achieved after synchronized exposure. Twins exhibit transliminal empathy. Vivian stronger in projection, Vera in anchoring. They don't know what they are. They mustn't. Vivian stepped back, her skin cold. "He was using us." Vera's eyes narrowed. "We were part of an experiment." The notes went on. Mentions of something called the mirror echo, a theory about consciousness existing in more than one physical location. The term entropic reflection repeated, underlined, circled, Doctor. Elmore had documented every interaction, every shared dream, every time one girl seemed to feel the pain or emotion of the other, and the conclusion was chilling. Room 13 may not be a room, it may be them. Vivian's breath caught. Beneath one stack of papers, Vera found photographs, grainy monochrome images of children, some alone, some in pairs. Notes scribbled on the back, lost cohesion, mirror collapse, and spontaneous dissociation. One photo was of a room, the east corridor's door visible in the corner. But the walls were bare, the space dark, the light in the photograph warped as if bent by heat. In the final drawer they found tapes, recordings. One was labeled Session 12, May 7th, 1951. Vera set it spinning on the old reel-to-reel machine. At first only static, then Dr. Elmore's voice. "Vivian, can you hear her?" A small, distant voice answered, "She's inside the walls." "And what is she saying?" A pause. Then, "She says I'm hers now." The reel snapped. Vivian stared at the machine, unmoving. She remembered none of it. Vera looked at her. "He's been doing this for years." They turned back to the covered mirror. Vivian shook her head. "Don't." But Vera was already pulling the drape down. The mirror revealed not their reflections, but a room. Red walls, no windows, a single piano, a chair facing it, no visible door. The twins stood frozen. Then the piano's lid lifted slowly, as if pushed from within. Vivian let out a soft sound, not quite a sob. "That's the room from my dreams," Vera nodded. "Then it's not just a dream." They covered the mirror again and left the room in silence, locking the door behind them. That night, Vivian played for the first time in weeks, the same melody she had heard from within the walls. Soft, haunting, incomplete. And from somewhere deep in the house, a second piano echoed the notes, just a beat behind. The winter of 1956 swallowed the Catskills in silence. Heavy, snow-sealed roads, silenced rivers, and left the Vellinger estate isolated once more. Just before the freeze, Clara insisted the girls be sent away, to the Bellington Institute, a private boarding school with high iron gates and stone towers that promised order through excellence. It was sudden, abrupt, with no explanation beyond her trembling voice. "The house needs rest." The girls were separated for the first time. No shared room, no shared classes. Only distant glimpses in dining halls, brief letters exchanged through cracks in the system. Vivian withered. Her fingers stopped dancing across piano keys. Her dreams became louder. Vera fought the silence by diving deeper into books, into symbols, into the mythologies she could still control. 6 months passed. Then the letter came. It was unsigned with no return address. A single sentence written in precise cursive, "The house has opened again." Vivian folded it carefully and slid it into her coat. That night, she visited Vera's dormitory under the cover of darkness. She knocked once. Vera was already at the door, as if expecting her. They left the next morning without permission, without luggage, without telling anyone. By the time the school noticed, the train had already carried them halfway back through the mountains. When they arrived at the estate, the snow was just beginning to melt. The path leading to the house was clear, though no prints marked it. The air was still, the fog clinging low to the trees. No one greeted them. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the silence was too perfect. No creaking, no ticking clocks, no fire in the hearth. The furniture was untouched. Dust hung suspended like frozen breath. But the moment they crossed the threshold, a low hum began to vibrate beneath their feet, deep and constant, like the growl of something ancient and half awake. Vivian turned to Vera. "Did you feel that?" Vera nodded, her eyes scanning the walls. "It's listening." Clara was gone. No trace of her. No notes. No packed belongings. Her rosaries lay coiled on the floor beside her bedroom door, as though dropped in a hurry. Her bed was stripped. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air, mixed with something metallic and sour. Dr. Elmore's study was still locked. The key no longer worked. The house had changed in subtle ways. Hallways seemed longer, corners sharper. Doors stood slightly ajar that had once been sealed. Portraits on the walls had shifted, some showing faces they didn't recognize, others bearing impossible likenesses of themselves in period clothing neither had ever worn. The east corridor remained, its wallpaper darker still. The door at the end now bore a new mark, etched into the wood, faint and circular, like a fingerprint burned into the grain. They didn't approach it, not yet. Instead, they explored the rest of the house. In the parlor, the piano had been uncovered, clean, polished, waiting. Vivian sat without speaking. Her fingers hovered, then pressed a single key. It rang out pure and full. Then a second note followed, not from her. Vera turned sharply. "There's no one else here." Vivian stood. "There is." Upstairs, in the hallway near the nursery, they found a new door, one that had never existed before. It was small, just big enough for a child, and it had no knob, just a brass ring hanging from the center. Vera reached out to touch it. It was warm. They didn't open it. That night, the house groaned louder than ever before. The walls pulsed, the windows fogged, the staircase lights flickered in rhythm with their heartbeats. Vivian woke, gasping. Someone had whispered her name. Not in fear, in longing. She sat up and saw Vera already awake, staring at the ceiling. "She's in the house," Vera said softly. Vivian didn't ask who. She already knew. It began with a knocking, Not on the door, but from within the walls. Soft, rhythmic. 3 times, then silence. 3 again. Always at dusk. Vivian tried to ignore it. She pressed her pillow tighter over her ears, hummed familiar tunes, even returned to the piano in hopes the music would drown it out. But nothing stopped the knocking. And then came the whispers. Not words, not sentences. Just a tone, low, coaxing like the wind bending through iron. Vera listened differently. She counted the knocks. She mapped the sounds on old sheet music, comparing them to frequencies from her father's notes. She came to a conclusion. They're trying to communicate. Vivian's expression tightened. Who? Vera didn't answer. It was on the 3rd night that the house delivered something unexpected. Lying on their shared bed was a single object, a candle. Tall, black, unburned, wrapped in string and placed upon a page torn from the family Bible. One verse underlined in red. They that make them are like unto them, so is everyone that trusteth in them. Clara's handwriting unmistakable. They didn't speak of it. But that night the air grew thick with expectation. The candle remained in the room untouched, but neither dared throw it away. 2 days later, Vera found the rest of the items, hidden in a velvet box behind the wall panel in Clara's dressing room. 5 smaller candles, dried herbs, a circle of polished bone fragments, and a book bound in green leather. No title, no author. Inside were handwritten rituals, prayers of summoning, diagrams for cleansing, instructions for protection and invocation. At the center, one page stood out, to bridge the living and the witnessed. Vivian's hands trembled as she traced the ink. You want to call her? She's already here, Vera replied. This will only help us hear her clearly. That night they prepared the room. The library, once dusty and forgotten, was cleared. The candle was placed at the center. Symbols drawn in chalk encircled them. The page was read aloud by Vera, slow and deliberate. Vivian remained silent until the final line. Are you sure this is safe? Vera met her eyes. Nothing in this house has ever been safe. The flame lit on the first strike. No wind, no matches. Just fire rising as if summoned by breath itself. The room dimmed. The shadows lengthened unnaturally. And then, without warning, the air shifted. The candle flickered violently, and the walls began to breathe. A voice, not their own, emerged from the stillness. Not loud, not frightening, just familiar. Why did you leave me? Vivian's eyes widened. Hetty. Silence. Then, she never left. She became. Vera leaned forward. What are you? The flame bent toward her, then straightened. The 13th. The memory made flesh. The chalk began to crack. The bones rattled. Vivian reached out to blow the candle out, but her body froze. Cold gripped her spine. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Finish the song, the voice urged. Open the door. Suddenly from the hallway footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. Then a knock at the library door, 3 times. Vivian screamed. The flame vanished. Darkness rushed in like a wave. When the lights returned, the circle was broken, the chalk erased. The candle burned down to wax, and in the ash was a single perfect symbol, etched into the floorboards. They both recognized it. The same one that now marked the sealed door at the end of the east corridor. Neither spoke that night, but both lay awake, listening, waiting. In the days that followed the séance, the twins drifted apart in ways neither fully understood. Vivian stopped speaking as often. Her words, once soft and thoughtful, came in shorter fragments, like something inside her was retreating. She walked with her head low, fingers constantly twitching at invisible piano keys. She avoided mirrors, avoided the east corridor, avoided Vera. Vera, meanwhile, leaned in. She spent hours retracing the chalk symbols from the ritual, searching the library for clues, replaying every word the voice had spoken. She even returned to the velvet book, copying passages in her own handwriting, looking for patterns. She spoke to the house, sometimes whispering, sometimes challenging. At night, Vivian curled under blankets, flinching at every sound. Vera sat in the dark and listened. The bond they had once shared, so natural, so effortless, felt severed. One morning, Vivian entered the parlor and found Vera seated at the piano. She wasn't playing, just pressing one key repeatedly. A low D over and over. Her eyes were unfocused. "You never used to touch the piano," Vivian said quietly. Vera didn't look up. "You never used to hide." Vivian stepped back. "Something came through that night." "And it didn't hurt us," Vera replied. "It gave us answers." "Did it?" Vivian's voice cracked. "Or did it take something from us we haven't even noticed yet?" Vera finally looked up. "You're just scared." "I think you're not scared enough." They didn't speak again for hours. That night, Vivian dreamt of the Red Room again. The piano played by itself and someone stood behind her, hands on her shoulders, cold and familiar. When she turned to look, there was no face, just a shape, watching. She woke to find her bedsheets torn, as though clawed. Vera wasn't in her bed. She found her in the east corridor, standing barefoot, hands pressed against the sealed door. "I hear her clearer now," Vera said. Vivian didn't move. "You're not listening to her, you're becoming her." Vera smiled faintly. "What if I already was?" The next morning a new journal appeared in their room, bound in faded red leather untouched by dust. Inside, the handwriting was neither of theirs. The first entry read, "One twin remembers, one twin opens, the house will decide." Vivian slammed it shut and burned it in the fireplace, but the next night it was back on their table, open to the second entry. "She will only be denied once." Vivian began avoiding Vera altogether. She ate in silence, walked the halls alone, took to sleeping in different rooms each night to avoid the dream. But the house offered no refuge. Wherever she went, the music followed. A piano note here, a whispered phrase there, her reflection changing too slowly in a mirror by the stairs. Once she passed a closed door and heard her own voice on the other side, speaking words she had never said. She begged Vera to leave with her, to run, to forget it all. Vera refused. "This house is part of us," she said. "You're the one pretending it isn't." Vivian packed a bag. She walked to the front door, gripped the handle and couldn't move. Her arms trembled, her vision blurred. Behind her the house exhaled, a deep, resonant sound. She dropped the bag and collapsed to the floor, breathless. The door never opened. That night, they ate in silence. The candle from the séance lit itself again. In the flame, Vivian saw two girls, not them, but close, sitting back to back. One looked up and smiled, the other didn't move. The door was open. Neither of them had touched it. There had been no sound, no warning. One morning they walked past the east corridor and found the impossible. What had always been sealed, scratched and whispering, now stood ajar, just an inch, just enough to see darkness within. Vivian froze. Vera stepped forward. "Don't," Vivian whispered. But Vera had already placed her hand on the frame. It was warm again, almost pulsing. They didn't enter. Not yet. Instead, they stood there staring for what felt like hours. The hallway held its breath. The house made no sound. When they returned later that afternoon, the door was closed. The next morning it was open again. This pattern repeated for 3 days. Every night it shut, every dawn it beckoned. By the 4th day, something else changed. Vivian woke with a drawing clenched in her hand. Lines sharp, precise, not hers. It was a sketch of a room. Red wallpaper, no windows, a single upright piano in the center. A mirror on the far wall reflected a figure sitting at the keys. The figure had no face. She confronted Vera. "You did this." Vera shook her head. "No, but I've seen that room too." Vivian backed away. "It's trying to make us remember something we never lived, or something we lived but were made to forget." That night, Vivian stayed awake, eyes locked on the corridor. At exactly 3:13 in the morning, the door creaked fully open, slowly, as if aware of her gaze. Beyond it was still darkness, but deeper now, more textured. The next morning, she and Vera returned together. And the room had changed. Inside, faint outlines emerged, shapes in the wallpaper, faint impressions in the dust, footprints leading to the piano and back again, the scent of lavender and ash, a low vibration, almost imperceptible, that made their teeth buzz. Vivian turned to Vera. "We shouldn't be here." Vera didn't move. Her eyes had locked onto the mirror. "There's something behind the glass." Vivian looked. At first it was only their reflections, but then the surface shimmered. Another image formed behind them, distorted as if underwater. A girl, alone, sitting at the piano, weeping. Vivian stepped back. "She's trapped." Vera stepped closer. "No, she's waiting." Vivian pulled her away. "We're not going in." Vera resisted for a moment, then nodded. Not yet. That evening the dreams returned stronger than ever. Vivian saw herself walking the corridor endlessly, the floor stretching farther with each step, the walls whispering her name in 10 different voices. Vera dreamt of the room lit by candlelight, her hands playing a melody she didn't recognize but felt inside her chest like memory. The next morning the door was closed again, but this time the symbol etched into it had changed. Now there were 2 circles, interlocked. Inside the intersection, a single eye. Vivian refused to approach it. Vera placed her palm against the wood and whispered, "I'm ready." That afternoon Vivian found herself drawing again, pages and pages of the Red Room, each one slightly different. One had bookshelves, another had a crib, one showed the walls bleeding, she didn't remember making them. Then came the final drawing, the room as it was, the piano, the mirror, and in the mirror not a girl, but 2, standing back to back, one looking out, the other looking in. She dropped the pencil. The wind howled outside, though no windows were open. The house seemed to tilt. That night Vivian sat at the piano in the parlor. She began playing the melody she'd heard in dreams, and from down the hall, inside the sealed corridor, another piano began to echo. This time, the notes matched perfectly. Vivian awoke to silence, the kind that didn't feel empty but full, brimming with something unseen, something holding its breath. She sat up slowly. Vera's bed was empty. The blankets were folded, the door slightly ajar. She called her name once. No answer. The house was too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. No ticking clocks, no creaking beams, just that heavy, unnatural stillness. She searched every hallway, every stairwell, every room except one, the east corridor. Vivian stood before it, hands clenched. The door at the end remained shut. For the first time in days, she whispered Vera's name again, softer now, pleading. Then something caught her attention, a faint vibration beneath her feet, rhythmic, deliberate, like footsteps, but from below. She followed it, down the grand staircase, past the drawing room, past the old wine cellar, into the storage level they hadn't entered in years. Dust covered everything like snow. Shelves sagged with forgotten crates and warped books. The air smelled of damp wood and rust, and then she saw it. The floorboards near the far wall had been disturbed, a rug pushed aside, nails pulled up. A narrow square of darkness revealed beneath. She knelt and peered into the gap. Vera. Silence. Then from far below, too far, came an echo, a note from a piano. Vivian didn't think. She climbed in. The space beneath the house was impossibly large, more than a basement. It was a cavern of stone and earth with tunnels that twisted like veins. She followed the music, every step colder, every sound further. She found her sister after what felt like hours. Vera stood in the center of a circular chamber. Around her, 13 mirrors leaned against stone walls, none reflecting correctly. Each showed her from a different angle, at a different age, with different eyes. "Vera," Vivian whispered. Vera turned slowly. She looked older. Not in years, but in weight. Her eyes were distant, her skin pale. She held something in her hands, a piece of the velvet-bound book. "I didn't go through the door," she said. "I went under it." Vivian stepped forward. You've been gone for days. Vera blinked. No, just hours. Vivian shook her head. 3 days. I searched everywhere. Vera's eyes fell to the floor. Time doesn't work right here. Vivian looked around. Where are we? This is where the house remembers, Vera said. Where it keeps everything that doesn't belong anymore. Vivian looked at the mirrors. One of them showed her standing in the corridor, alone. Another showed her sleeping in a red room. One mirror was black, reflecting nothing at all. I saw Hetty, Vera continued. She was inside the mirror. She told me we aren't who we think we are. Vivian reached out. Come back with me. Vera didn't move. She said we're not separate, we're echoes, 2 halves of something that once was one. You don't believe that. She showed me, Vera whispered. She showed me the 13th. Vivian stepped closer. Then show me 2, but not here. The mirrors began to hum, low at first, then louder. One shattered without touch. The shards floated mid-air, spinning slowly. Vivian grabbed Vera's hand. Now! They ran. The tunnels bent. Some walls pulsed as they passed. The air thickened like syrup. The ground shifted underfoot, but they climbed, back to the hatch, back into the dust. Vivian slammed the boards shut behind them. Only when they reached the main hallway did they speak again. Vera's voice was small. I wasn't alone down there. Vivian looked at her. I know. They stood in silence. Then from upstairs the piano began playing by itself. A slow, mournful melody, and Vera whispered, she's almost finished the song. Vivian no longer trusted the house to stay the same from one day to the next. Doors opened to unfamiliar rooms. Windows revealed landscapes that didn't match the season. Once she stepped into the library and found the books rearranged, every title replaced with her name. They vanished an hour later. Vera spent most of her time in silence, tracing the mirror symbols from memory, her fingers stained with charcoal and old ink. She spoke less, but when she did, it was always about the 13th. Vivian tried to hold on to logic, until she found the letters. They were hidden behind a false panel in the upstairs hallway, inside a long-forgotten cabinet used for linens. She pulled back the wood, thinking it just loose, and discovered a narrow compartment filled with envelopes, dozens of them, some brittle with age, some more recent, all addressed to the same name. Miss Clara Vellinger, Vellinger Estate, Pembroke, NY. The return address was always the same, Hetty Granger. No number, no street, just the name. Vivian sat down on the hallway floor and began to read. The first was dated 1946. I hear things now, through the walls, through mirrors. You said it would stop once the girls were born, but it hasn't. Something walked behind me last night while I was praying. Another. The 13th is growing stronger. I see it in their eyes. Vera is the anchor, Vivian the echo. You said they'd balance each other. They don't. They amplify. Then, Elmore is doing things again. Not science, not prayer, something else. I saw the circle in the basement. You told me it was just a theory. Clara, you lied. Vivian's hands shook. One letter was sealed separately in a red envelope. She hesitated before opening it. If they read this, it means I'm gone. I left the key in the sewing cabinet. I hid the journal behind the second-floor wall. The mirror isn't just a mirror, it's a memory made permanent, and memories, when kept too long, become something else. There were more. One simply said, "Do not let her play the final note." Vivian stood slowly, clutching the letters. Her breath felt shallow. She turned and saw her own reflection in the hallway mirror. Except it wasn't her. It was her standing still, but her eyes blinked too late. The reflection smiled. She dropped the letters. That evening she confronted Vera. You knew. Vera looked up. I suspected. Hetty tried to stop this. She tried to bury it. That's not the same. Vivian stepped closer. What happens when the song ends? Vera didn't blink. I think that's when we see the 13th for what it really is. Vivian pulled out the red envelope. Then we don't let it finish. Vera's expression didn't change. What if it already has? That night, Clara returned. Or something wearing Clara's face. She appeared in the dining room, silent, hands folded. Her skin looked too smooth, too stretched. Her eyes were wrong, glassy, like water over glass. She said nothing. Vivian tried to speak. Couldn't. Vera whispered, "It's not her." The figure stood, turned, and walked toward the east corridor. Vivian followed. The figure vanished as it crossed the threshold. The door closed behind it. Later, Vivian found the final letter, one Hetty had never sent. "Clara, we made a mistake. The girls were never meant to be divided. You split them. You made them forget. But it remembers. The house remembers. And soon, it will reclaim what it lent you." At the bottom, a single phrase was underlined twice. "One will remain. The other will become." Vivian stared at it until her eyes blurred. When she looked up, the mirror across the room shimmered, and her reflection was gone. Vivian began to hum, softly, without realizing. The melody threaded through her breath, her footsteps, her thoughts. It wasn't the song from the séance, it was older. Something she hadn't learned but always known. Vera noticed first. "You're playing it in your sleep," she said. "Every night." Vivian stopped responding. Her gaze drifted often, as if following something invisible. She stared at mirrors without flinching. She walked through hallways no longer mapped in her mind. And every now and then she'd say a name neither had spoken aloud. Clara. Not as mother, as something else. One morning the piano began to play before anyone touched it. Vivian walked into the parlor and sat beside it. She reached for the keys. Vera stepped in. "Vivian, don't." But Vivian only smiled. "She's waiting." Vera grabbed her arm. "You don't have to do this." "I already did," Vivian replied, "a long time ago." That day she wrote music, pages and pages of it, notes that curved into symbols. Measures that resembled doorways, each line drawing closer to something ancient and precise. The ink smelled like ash, the paper aged faster in her hands. By dusk, she had finished the final sheet. She placed it gently on the piano and left the room. She didn't eat that night, didn't speak, only stood in front of the mirror near the nursery, watching herself, unmoving. When Vera woke the next morning, Vivian was gone. The sheet music lay open. The keys were stained with something dark. Not blood, not ink. Something older. The house had changed again. The east corridor was sealed. Every mirror was covered in frost. Vera searched for hours. She found her in the red room. A room that had no door, no window, no light source, but still glowed faintly from within. Vivian sat at the piano, her fingers resting on the keys, her head tilted gently to one side. She looked peaceful, untouched. A single sheet of music rested in her lap. She wasn't breathing. The room was impossible. It shouldn't exist. And yet it did. Vera stepped forward, but her feet never touched the floor. Something held her at the threshold. She called out. Vivian didn't move. A note played on the piano by itself, then another, then the full melody, the same one she'd written. Vera screamed. The walls didn't echo, they absorbed. She ran. She tore through the house, ripping down drapes, shattering mirrors, throwing open every door. She screamed for Vivian, for Hetty, for Clara, for anyone. Only silence answered. That night, the piano played again. Vivian's song. Start to finish, every note perfect. At the final chord, every mirror in the house cracked, and the air shifted. Later, when Vera returned to the red room, it was gone. No door, no wall, just smooth plaster where it had once been. Vivian's shoes sat at the end of the east corridor. Beside them, a folded page. It read, "She needed to finish it, and so did I." The handwriting was not Vivian's. It wasn't anyone's, Vera recognized, but she knew what it meant. She didn't cry, not then. The house didn't allow it. Instead, she lit a candle, the same one from the séance, and watched the flame bend backward, toward the corridor, toward the 13th. Vera stayed in the house. She didn't speak to anyone. Not that there was anyone left to speak to. Clara had vanished. Dr. Elmore long before. Hetty had become a whisper, and Vivian was a memory that the house now carried in every wall. Days passed. or maybe weeks. Time no longer moved in straight lines. Sometimes the morning sun rose in the west. Sometimes the clocks ticked backward. She stopped counting. The mirrors remained cracked. The east corridor stayed sealed. Until it didn't. One morning Vera stepped into the hall and saw it again. The door, wide open. She didn't hesitate. Inside, the red room pulsed with warmth. The wallpaper breathed. The piano waited. But the mirror had changed. It no longer reflected her. It showed Vivian, standing, not seated. Her eyes were calm. Her hands were folded. She was wearing the same dress Vera had buried in the cedar chest as a child. Vera stepped closer. The mirror fogged, then cleared. And the room on the other side was no longer the red room. It was a copy of their bedroom. Everything as it had been when they were 10. Even Hetty's worn slippers near the fireplace. The reflection didn't move. But the walls began to hum. Behind the mirror, behind Vivian's calm face, something stirred. It spoke without sound. There must always be two. Vera reached out. The glass was warm. She pressed her palm flat. A vibration pulsed through her fingertips, a flash of images, Vivian screaming, Clara on her knees, Dr. Elmore carving symbols into the floor, Hetty holding both twins and weeping into their hair. Then the music returned, soft, distant, but not from the piano, from beneath the floor. Vera turned. The walls cracked. The red wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing the bones of the house, wood, stone, blood. She didn't scream. She understood. She was the one who stayed, the anchor, the second, the 13th. She walked to the piano, sat, lifted the sheet music Vivian had left. There were only 12 measures, but beneath them, lightly etched into the corner, was a final symbol. One Vera had drawn hundreds of times in dreams. She added a 13th measure, one final note. She played. The house trembled. From every cracked mirror, light bled like smoke. The reflections smiled. So did Vera. The door behind her closed. No one saw her again. Weeks later, a team of local inspectors arrived. The mansion had been reported abandoned, its taxes unpaid for years. They found no signs of life, no family, no bodies, only dust, mirrors, and echoes. And in a sealed room on the far west wing, one no blueprint ever listed, they found a girl. Dead, peaceful, no trauma, no struggle. But her body sat before a piano, hands poised, eyes closed. The investigators couldn't explain how she had gotten in. The door was sealed from the inside. And the strangest part, that room had no piano, just the girl, and a floor covered in music sheets, each measure blank, except the last. One note, drawn over and over again, as if someone had been practicing it for decades. A single word written beneath them. Remember. Decades passed. Time washed over the Vellinger estate like a slow, relentless tide, wearing away memory until all that remained was rumor and rot. The house stood, abandoned, at the edge of the Catskills, its windows black, its doors forever sealed by boards and chains. Locals whispered stories to their children, warning them never to stray too close to the woods after sunset. It was said that the house ate sound, that no echo ever returned once it crossed the threshold. No one spoke the twins' names anymore, not in daylight. In 1973, the estate was finally condemned. The last surviving land agent signed the paperwork with a shaking hand, and demolition crews were brought in from out of state, men who didn't know the stories, who didn't care. They came with axes and sledgehammers, bulldozers and saws, eager to wipe away the past. But the house fought them. The walls were thicker than blueprints suggested, built of stone that dulled their tools. Doors opened and closed by themselves. Entire rooms appeared and vanished. Several men quit after the first day, claiming they'd seen shadows moving in empty halls or heard music rising from behind the walls. One morning, as the bulldozers finally broke through the east wing, they found a hidden chamber, small, choked with dust, sealed on every side. In the center stood a battered table. Upon it, 2 portraits, charred and warped by time. The first was a girl with dark hair, eyes bright and watchful. The second, a girl with the same face but older, sadder. The names beneath were faded, almost erased, but they'd been swapped. Vivian's name beneath Vera's face, Vera's beneath Vivian's. No one could say why. The workers removed the portraits, but strange things began to happen. Equipment failed. Light bulbs burst. The foreman claimed he heard humming at night, two voices singing in perfect harmony, just beyond the range of memory. In the rubble, they found music sheets, hundreds of them, blank except for a single, perfect note. No one stayed after sunset. By autumn, nothing remained but a barren patch of earth, scorched and still. Wild grass grew over the old foundation, but nothing would take root where the east corridor had once stood. People say the ground is cursed, others say it's just a story. But every now and then, on windless nights, someone walking the edge of the old estate hears the faintest sound, like a piano playing far away, two melodies echoing each other through time. And those who know the legend, those who still remember, warn their children to never enter a room they do not recognize, because in the spaces between memory and forgetting, the house still waits. So do the twins. Some secrets never die. If you followed this story to its end, don't forget to subscribe to uncover more forgotten tales just like this one. And now click on the video suggested on your screen to discover another family's chilling secret. The Vellinger twins are gone, their fates woven into the bones of a house that no longer stands. But somewhere, in that shadow between worlds, two girls still sit at a piano playing a song only they remember. And if you listen closely, you might just hear the final note.